rose. Okay, admittedly, this one does not have thorns on it, but it's also made of, felt or whatever, so it's not really designed to have thorns. But I figured it was applicable for this video. That'll be over here until I need it later. So, before we fully get into the chapter, I had a couple of thoughts that I thought of based off of last chapter with, the whole, Gunko Pied Pipering the kids out of the village or away from the school, and the giant monsters popping up. So, things that we learn in this chapter kind of default a little bit of this, but some of it is still applicable. So, some of the things that I thought of is, of course, in regards to Harry Potter, because I'm a dork, like some Potterhead. But in Harry Potter, obviously, there are the boggarts that are the little monster thing that, will turn into whatever your worst fear is, the person in front of its worst fear. For Hermione, it's McGonagall saying she failed a test. For Ron, it's a spider. Valid, probably one of mine. For Molly Weasley, it is seeing a bunch of her children and friends dead. So it's like Arthur and a bunch of her children, and like Ron or Hermione. Harry, I don't remember if Hermione, if we see Hermione as one of those, but it's like seeing them dead is one of her worst fears, which unfortunately comes to fruition with Fred. For Neville, it's of course Snape. For Lupin, it's the moon. So we don't see all of them. I think for one of the Pavarti twins, it's a mummy. For Dean, or was it, no, for Seamus, I think it's a banshee. But we get to see like a lot of their worst fears as it comes through. And then of course, they have the ridiculous charm that is designed to help with defeating the monster, because the way that you defeat a boggart is with laughter. Now there is Bogard in One Piece, very different character. I don't know, he's probably someone's worst fear, but he's a very different character. But they have the ridiculous charm, and one of the thoughts I think that some people have had about like the monsters that we see that are coming from the children's nightmares, all of these strange and mythical things, and then someone's mom, and some of the thoughts people had was like, well, how much damage can these things take? We don't really get an answer to that in this chapter. In the last chapter, we saw Saul and Walrus dude beat up the Jormungandr type snake, but we didn't get an exact answer as to whether or not it disappeared yet, if it like took enough damage and disappeared. I made the comparison to like Conjuro's drawings, that if they receive enough damage, they will, disappear. They'll fall apart and turn back into ink. So it was kind of like that same concept of like, how easily are these things defeatable? And that kind of led me into, also in Harry Potter there are the Dementors, which, they're designed to, activate, make you feel like you'll never be happy again, never be cheerful again, all of that stuff. And for Harry, his worst fear is a Dementor, because it's fear itself type of a thing. And so it's like, okay, and then for the Dementors, there's, the Patronus charm. I have my little prongs right here. There's the Patronus charm that is designed to be able to go up against a Dementor and protect yourself from it. Mom and I are working our way through the Harry Potter movies right now, and we just watched Order of the Phoenix last night, and that has Harry and Dudley get attacked by the Dementors in the beginning of the movie, and then the scene for Dumbledore's army where they're all learning their Patronuses, where they're all being able to like create their Patronuses for the first time. So it is kind of this whole thing of, there has to be something that these things are weak against. Possibly just enough physical attacks will destroy them, or maybe there's the whole thing of like helping the kids wake up and then watch their fear get defeated, would be a good way of doing it. Seeing the Giants defeat them, seeing the Straw Hats defeat them, particularly seeing Luffy in his Nika form defeating them, something like that would be a good way of doing it. The other thing it made me think of, and this is where my Sailor Moon nerd is showing, is one of the Sailor Moon movies, the third one, Black Dream Hole, was, you know, kind of has it opens with the premise, or it has a premise of like the Pied Piper coming into play, where, you know, it's a bunch of these like alien dudes who are like, you know, kidnapping children from around the world with the Pied Piper thing of, you know, playing their pipe while the children are all asleep, and it leads them out of town and onto a boat, which is literally what, you know, the God's Knights are trying to do in this chapter, is lead the children through the branches and onto a boat for them to be able to take them back to Marijois. So, yeah, there's that. How they're expecting to get the kids back to Marijois on the boat is a little bit left up for debate. I don't know if all three of them could steer the boat, or if, I don't know, between their powers, maybe they'd be fine. I don't know. We'll find out. Maybe they're not planning that far ahead yet. But in the, you know, the Black Dream Hole, you know, the children are all being gathered up so that way their energy from their dreams can be used to create this giant black dream hole that is, you know, the brainchild of Queen Badianu, who is, you know, the big bad lady. I don't know, maybe she's a giant evil lady, like, I don't know, maybe Eames evil too, or, well, we know Eam is evil, but like Eam is like maybe female, so there's maybe a connection there. And at one point she like merges with the Black Dream Hole, and then of course, spoiler alert for anyone who has not seen this movie, even though eventually I will end up talking about it when eventually I get around to doing Sailor Moon stuff. Again, they, you know, Serena and Rini teaming up with their powers and the other powers of the scouts and dreams and blah, 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 are able to defeat her and save all the children. So, you know, this is kind of like, you know, how much of this is going to be like the Straw Hats being able to protect the children and defeat the nightmares, the Giants being able to do that, and all of that stuff. So, for the chapter, this is chapter 11,041, titled God's Knights, which, you know, we get a good look at some of the God's Knights' personalities a bit more in this chapter. Not that we weren't getting good looks at them anyway, but, you know, now we get a bit more. And we get a nice, fun color page for what we have here. So we have, it's all the Straw Hats, and they are racing on flying fish. So it is like the Straw Hats doing like a car race, and they're all just on top of the flying fish that we, you know, that we saw with like the Rosy Life Riders and stuff, like Duval and his group. And like, so all of the Straw Hats have like their own one, or it's like, well, like Chopper is teamed up with Zoro, and Usopp is teamed up with Frankie, and then we got Brooke on the same one with Robin, and then Jinbei's like swimming in the background, but we've got like Luffy in the lead, and Nami's next to him, and Zoro's like neck and neck with Luffy and everything. So their flying fish are kind of their colors and everything. Like, you know, Luffy's is red, Zoro's is blue, which is actually more associated with Sanji, and Sanji is on a green one, which is just funny. Nami's is orange. You know, we see kind of this stuff. And then like one of the signs in it says speed is the weapon. So it's like, you know, they're just having fun racing, which is just, you know, fun little, you know, color page spread. I think it was based off of a reader request. Into the chapter. So we cut back to the school, and we're at the beach at, you know, down by the school, by the Warrior Spring. Saul has run out of the school. We can see a couple of the different monsters have shown up in the background. Like we see the storm cloud with lightning on it is in the background, is shown up by the school. We also see, I think it's the weird ghost in the top hat type thing that has shown up as well, and it's like kind of attacking part of the bridge or something between like the library and the school. We do not see Lilith or Bonnie in this chapter, but I guess there's a possibility they will show up later. I mean, like, they are in at least the vicinity. We also do not see Ripley or Frankie in this chapter, but we see almost everybody else. All the other key players at the moment. So Saul's running after the kids, you know, yelling at them to stop and everything. And, you know, Saul's kind of like made his way next to him, like next to where the kids are, you know, following Gung Ho's arrow. And he's like, shouting at the kids, Ilva, Magu, Ranja. And Ilva's the one in the lead. She's like the little girl with like the big helmet on her head, and we're gonna find out something about her a little bit later in the chapter. And he's like, they really are sleepwalking. And like they see the arrow, like Robin and Chopper, still hanging out in Saul's beard. So they're like witnessing this as much as he is. And Saul's like, what's this white cloth? Where are the kids going? And he's just like trying, or like maybe Chopper or Robin are asking that. And Robin's warning Saul, be careful, Saul. That teacher warned us not to touch them. And Chopper's like, the one that was covered in blood? And it's just like, yes, Chopper. The teacher that was covered in blood warned you not to touch the children. Saul's not going to follow that order, or follow that request. And Saul starts reaching out, and he's like, I know, but it doesn't look like there's anything nearby, and we can't let them keep walking like this. It's dangerous. And he reaches down, and like a good chunk of the page is this picture of him reaching down and trying to touch Ilva. And he's like, let's just get them back to the sky. Ah! And he's like screaming because as like he reaches down to touch her, and we see like this outline of like invisible thorns wrapped around Ilva. And like we see it stab into Saul's hand. And, it's like just like, I mean, that would be a very scary thing. It's like, I'm going to go and pick up my child. That whole thing. And that's going to be one of the running things in this chapter. That Summers seems to find effing hilarious. Can we please just like put Sea Prism Stone on him and throw him off the top of Elbath and see what happens? Just see what happens. How many branches is he going to hit on the way down before just getting impaled on a mountain? I would like that. That would be a great way to get rid of him. That would be just a wonderful way to get rid of him. Yeah, here, you want pain? Shove. Ow, 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 ow. I'd be fine with that. So he reaches down and he touches Ilva, and he just gets like stabbed with these invisible thorns, and he's like, ah! Gets kind of knocked back by the pain, which is reasonable. I mean, like, Saul is a warrior. He is, he's not like a warrior by Elbath standards, by, their type of warrior, but he is a warrior. He has hockey. We saw him use it in the last chapter. He was a vice admiral. He was, a vice admiral for a good chunk of time. He's probably done some training since he's been on Elbath just to familiarize himself with some of the other ways of training, with the other types of fighting that they have on Elbath. I mean, I would too, in all honesty. I'd be like, I at least want to learn how to defend myself, type of a thing. And he like falls back and he's just hurt. Like Robin and Chopper are just very concerned. It's just like, what the? Saul, I was like, what happened? Did something stab you? And then we get like this, there's an announcement going on right now. Anji is on, we're going to see, it's another type of Den Mushi in a second. She's like, I'm calling from the Walrus School. All our students just suddenly fell into a deep sleep, and 9 of them are walking away, but they're still unconscious. So she's talking to the, communication snail that they have at the school, and we're going to get to that in a second. We also see like her talking into it, and then we also see, we see at least one of the other monsters has shown up in the background. I think it's just one of the other random like snake type monsters that got drawn. And then we see in one of the other panels a bunch of the children sleeping with like the bubbles coming out of their nose, that, indicative of sleep type of a thing. We cut to the Western Village where the party has now kind of come to a very screeching halt with the fire showing up and the giant lightning strike beforehand. So, and she's, we see the report coming in, and it's just like, we have no idea what's causing this. And Dory and Broggy are just like, oh, the school children, my kid is there. It's like someone's screaming in the background. Reasonable. And she's also like, that's not all. Mysterious beasts have emerged from the forest. And there's like, monsters? Are those tykes going to be okay? And so they're all just getting very worried. And then we get a close-up image of this. It's called a dictation snail. Only used within Elbath, so it's another one of the, special type of snails. The world in general has the Den Mushi. They have the pond snails in Wano. We saw like this icy Yeti type snail that was next to Loki which we have not seen since that scene when he was talking to Shaggy. We have not seen that snail since then, so I don't know what happened to that snail. And we have not gotten any more information on Shaggy yet. And this, the snail is still, Anji is still talking, and she's like, the kids were heading towards the 8th branch. So it's like they've got like all of Elbath is probably broken up into, this is branch 6, that's branch 9, this is branch 23, that's branch 5. Just however they have it marked off, and like just they all know where like the different branches are. It's like knowing like all the streets and everything like that, like in your town, like all the major arteries in your hometown, or areas that you go to a lot. And Nami, Brook, and Chopper are all next to, or sorry, Nami, Brook, and Jinbei are all next to the snail, so they're like hearing about this anyway. Brook is still drunk. Jinbei is not really drunk. Nami's probably not drunk. And Nami's like, all this is on top of a fire. This is so sudden. Are they going to be all right? Or are they going to be okay? And this calls back to, like, we all know that Nami is very protective of children. We saw this with the children in Punk Hazard way back at the beginning when they first got into the new world. We saw this when it came to Momonosuke and Tama and Toko and everything like that in Wano. So we're even we saw this that Nami is very protective of children. So it's like her protective instincts are coming in, so she's probably going to want to go off and try to help save the children. And then Jinbei is just like, what's going on over there? And like they're seeing in the distance where like a bunch of the fire is coming. And then it's just like one of the giants has like jumped up on top of one of the houses, one of the buildings, and it's just like, the 8th branch. So they mean back there, right? Is everything okay? And then we cut to a bunch of the other giants who are still clearly drunk. And one of them is Jarl. And Jarl's like, this is awful. My great-great-granddaughter, Ilva, goes there. And then someone's like, great-great-grandchild? So it's just like, so we have a connection here. We've learned that Ilva is Jarl's great-great-granddaughter. Fun. And so I don't know how much that connection is going to come into play, but given some of the stuff that Summers is going to say later in the chapter, that might be something that gets brought up. And Nami is just like, you're all way too drunk. And Brook is still drunk, as I said, and he's like, you can't lose your wits at a time like this. You still have your head on your crotch. How do you sober a skeleton? Slap him? I don't know. I'm sure there's something Nami could do to try to sober up Brook, but I don't know what that would be beyond, I don't know, flashing him her panties or something. I don't know. Find me the largest woman you have in a skirt. Shove Brook underneath her and point his head up. Oh, God. I don't know. That'd be a quick way to sober up Brook, I would assume. So then we have one of the squalls or whatever, their sky boats showing up, the cloud boats showing up. And this is the fire brigade showing up to go to try to fight against the fire off in the distance on branch 8. And this is something we kind of thought was going to happen, that like the Elbathians are very prepared for when fire happens. There's, fire brigades or fire trucks type, their version of the fire trucks. They have the firefighting boats and stuff like that. That are probably well equipped to go and try to deal with fire, to try to at least mitigate it while they try to evacuate anybody on that branch and then slice off the branch to prevent it from spreading to the rest of the tree. So they're on their way there, and unfortunately they get attacked by the Draugr, the zombie type warrior that pops up, and it attacks them and knocks the boat out of the sky and just crashes the boat into the ground, which then gets the reaction of Jarl, Dory, all the rest of them are just like, ah! Like just, oh, that's not good. Our fire boat just got knocked out of the sky. That is very not helpful in this situation. Plus, now they're seeing this giant thing pop up, this giant undead warrior from their mythology pop up. Undead beast, and getting like a size comparison because he's huge. Cut to where the Gods Knights are, And we got to Sommers, who is just finding this exceedingly hilarious and laughing his head off. And he's just like, ha 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 ha, yeah, did you see that? That look on that giant's face when the thorns got him, talk about priceless. What was that expression again? Love is both roses and thorns. And God, this is going off of like that comment that Summers made at the end of last chapter, that like the official translation was, to know love is to wound one another, was like the official translation that they came up with for it. I wanted to double check to see how they translated that. And he's just like, he's finding this exceedingly hilarious. Gunko is kind of more indifferent about this situation, and we don't really get that much of what Kirringham necessarily thinks about this, but I don't know if he finds it as entertaining as Summers does. But Summers is the one that seems to find this the most entertaining. And he's like asking about this, and all of the three gods knights are sitting at this like table that they popped out of nowhere. We'll get to where the table came from in a moment. And they're all sitting and eating, and Gunko is just like, beats me, like she doesn't pay any attention to those types of quotes. And then Summers is just like, you're such a stick in the mud, Gunko. The more love you have, the deeper passions, thorns take hold. Passions, thorns take hold. And he's like trying to wax poetically, but it's just really effing twisted what he's talking about, because he is talking about the fact that like the more you love someone, the deeper they hurt you, which is a very effing messed up way of looking at love. And as someone who has been, hurt by someone I loved, I know some of how that feels. Not going into what happened there, but I know some of how that feels for like, yes, if you really love someone and then they do something that betrays you, it does hurt a lot. But this is different. This is Sommers just trying to twist all of this, and we'll find out a bit more in a second. He's like, it'll be even better when their folks show up, right? I love this game. If they try to hug their kids, the thorns will rip them to pieces. The brats won't even want to look at them after that. They'll be bawling themselves, bawling their eyes out when they realize their folks died right in front of them. Summers is finding this way too entertaining. Like, okay, again, going off of Harry Potter, because that's one of the things on top of mind lately, we're just watching through the movies again. You have Bellatrix, who loves to torture people, and Voldemort loves to torture people. The Death Eaters love to torture people, love to torture any of their enemies. They take great joy in it, and causing them physical and mental anguish and pain and everything else like that. We see that they love to use the Cruciatus curse and everything else like that. Snape even says that the Dark Lord will, will make you suffer to the point that you are begging for death when there is no other entertainment he can get out of you. Then he will kill you. We see this with Neville's parents and unfortunately, and other people, unfortunately, who were, Cruciatus into insanity by the Death Eaters. But the thing is that Voldemort and the Death Eaters tend to look at love more as a weakness than this type of thing. I mean, like, they use it to exploit people, obviously. Like, they would capture students and then use them as bait for their parents to torture them, particularly if their parents are associated with, like, the Order of the Phoenix or just against the, we see them do this with, like, Luna and Xenophilius, where they kidnap Luna and then they use her as, against Xenophilius to be like, hey, stop printing all of this stuff about, in support of Potter. And we'll give your, we'll use you as bait to get Potter and everything. And we see how much Xenophilius is willing to do to try to, get Luna back. Even though he hates that he has to do this, he wants his daughter back because she's all he has left. So we see some of that. We see that, like, desperation that, like, Summers is willing to do this because, I don't think he would be willing to do this to another God's Knight or to another, celestial dragon and their child, like, use their child to, like, hurt them or something like that. And we're going to see the same flippant attitude come from Gunko later. where, Summers is more than willing to use these children as bait and as a trap for not just the teachers, but also for the other, their family and friends and stuff like that who care about the children. Use this to be able to hurt them in the process, and then destroy the morale. It's a way of destroying the morale of the country, because if he's able to use, particularly if they're able to make the children hurt their parents in this regard with like the thorns that he used, and we'll get to his power in a second or in a moment. With his powers, with his thorns, he's able to use that to then hurt the parents, or hurt the teachers, or hurt any of the other family members that are there, Jarl and stuff like that. Like if he showed up and tried to touch Ilva like Saul did, Saul definitely cares about these children quite a lot. Same thing with like the other teachers at the school probably very much care about the children and everything like that. That's, teachers are supposed to care about their students. And such. We saw the other teacher that tried to protect the children. He got very badly injured as well. And I was going to do the comparison that it's like it's trying to hug a cactus. And yes, there are crazy people out there who like to try to hug cactuses. Don't ask me effing why, but they do. But it's like trying to hug a cactus, and you're willing to put up with that pain because you want to hug the cactus, or you're an idiot. But in this case, it's like Summers is looking at this as just like a form of entertainment. And we're going to see this again later in very flippant attitudes towards like anyone who's not a celestial dragon and not a god's knight, someone that they don't view as either equal or just slightly below them type of a thing. They view everybody else very similar to the way that the Gorosei view, the Marines as like, yeah, they're useful, but they're expendable. They're insects compared to us. We saw Saturn have that opinion when it came to the other, came to the Marines and everything else like that. And, so we get to see some of that here, and we get that very flippant attitude and very laissez-faire attitude when it comes to the amount of pain that they are causing, not just the children, but also, the danger and everything else like that they're showing to this island, because if they could destroy the island's morale by hurting the parents of the children and the family members and stuff like that of the children, and then using that to leverage them along with having the children as hostages if they get them to the boat like they're planning, use the children as hostages, particularly if they get them back to Marijois, where they'll just turn the kids into slaves. Probably that would just be like, every family gets a new slave. Here, come pick your child giant slave type of thing is probably what they would do, because like they don't care about the children. We're gonna see this later with what Gunko says, because like they're kind of walking toward an area where the fire is, and she's like, oh, if the fire gets them, we'll just use the next batch or whatever. Okay, I do not have the patience to be a teacher, but I am also like, no, I would protect children. I would be trying to save them in this case. My child or not, I would try to do what I could to protect them in this type of situation. It's like the Straw Hats find out what's going on here, fully find out how, what is going on here and how this is going on. Nami is going to frickin' want to destroy Summers. I kind of want to see that. I kind of want to see Nami fight Summers for the way that he's fight against these guys. For the way, and like Robin too, because Robin really cares about children too. We saw that with Toko, and we saw that with Bonnie as her like younger self, as her true form. We saw that type of a situation there, and seeing that like Chopper, of course, would want to protect the children as well, because we saw that again at Punk Hazard, and all of that. So it's just like, and like Luffy likes kids. He's he didn't get on the best terms with the kids, but he's still going to want to protect them and everything else like that. So there's, all of that there. So they're just finding this exceedingly entertaining. And then we cut to where we see the next, image has Summers with the thorns wrapped around his arm. And we were kind of expecting something like this for his power, because the part of the guard on his sword has thorns on it and everything, and now we're seeing him have the thorns wrapping around his arm. And he's like, even murder can be moving. And it is info boxes. Saint Summers, thorn fruit, a briar man. So not Yuri Briar from Spy X Family, different type of a briar, although thorns are involved here. And Yuri is technically a government agent, but he would not want to do something to harm children. God, no. So he has thorns as his power, is, which you would think is like a very basic ability, but in this case, I mean, yeah, thorns can be very useful, and it depends on like what he's able to make the thorns out of. The ones that are around the children look like they are just like invisible thorns, so it's probably something where he like worked on that technique. And then it might be like, what can he make the thorns out of? Like, can he touch, a certain type of metal and it makes the thorns out of the metal, or rocks or wood or whatever type of a thing. So his power is very similar to, some other characters that I came up with was, or similarities here for the thorns was Ibarra, or a Vine from My Hero Academia, who's in Class 1B, but she would be, and she has like a saint-like appearance as well, because like her original saint name, or her original hero name is like Maria or whatever, because it's a reference to like Ave Maria, the Virgin Maria, the mother, Jesus' mom and stuff like that, and it's kind of like what her original hero name was a reference to. She would be utterly disgusted by what Summers is doing with his thorns. She would be utterly disgusted by this. And then the other thing that it kind of made me think of was, like, in Sleeping Beauty, Disney nerd, getting to tap into a lot of my different nerd things. Got Harry Potter, Sailor Moon, Disney now, bit of Spy X Family there. We're going to get into Marvel later. But, we have it that, in Sleeping Beauty and like the climax of the movie, of the original movie, they have, Maleficent makes like the wall of thorns appear around the castle that then Prince Philip has to then fight through. And then in the remake, in the Maleficent movie, the thorns around the castle are something that was built by King Stephen, and they're all made out of iron, because iron is a fairy's weakness. So that means that Maleficent, when she is trying to get through the castle to get to where Sleeping Beauty is, she, because Maleficent has go watch Maleficent. It's actually a really, really, really good movie. It's one of the better ones for the live action remakes they did, in my opinion. And they get Maleficent. Maleficent has to work her way through these thorns that are made of iron that are like her natural enemy, to try to get to Sleeping Beauty, to try to get to Aurora, to try to wake her up. And we see her go through all of this to try to get to Aurora, and that's her, in the Maleficent, in the movie Maleficent, and then Mistress of all evil and everything else like that. We have her as like the representation of like true love. Her love for Aurora is true love. And that is kind of very similar to what's going on here with like Summers is like, oh, well, I'll use this power to, make the children, cause pain to their parents and the teachers as they touch them. And then like, how much are they going to be willing to have to fight through this pain and fight through the thorns and everything else like that in order to try to save their own children? And how many of them are going to get, either minor hurt or grievously injured, possibly killed in the process, in order to do so. So it is kind of like that question there. And we continue, and we just have Summers just goes back to eating, and he's just like, it'll be death by love. That's something to look forward to, right? And he's like looking at Gunko, and she's just like, ... does not care. And he like flips out of his chair, and he's like, come on, you're too stoic, it's pathetic. It's like, stab him already. And Gunko and Killingham are just kind of talking, and Killingham's like, Gunko, that route what route are you using? And she's like, oh, the central path. There are other thick branches. And we get like this kind of a mini map of like one of the branches of Elbat that shows where the owl library is and the walrus school is, and like the path that she's leading the children on, the sleeping children on, down from those to the western village, down through the harbor, or down to the harbor where they're going to have like the cloud ships waiting for them, or like they're not the cloud ships, but like the uh, where their harbor for like the ocean is, for the sea is. She's like, but making them go that way will get them to the ocean clouds I saw by the village. And Summers is just like, to be in the center is to be vulnerable. That's a harsh reality to face, especially when you're too helpless to move. And then Keringham is just like, Summers, this needs salt. And Summers thinks of salt. Keringham puts him to sleep, reaches into the cloud that pops up above Keringham, above Summers' head, and then pulls out salt. You know, a little tray, little bowl that has like salt on it. And he pulls it out, and he's just like, and we get like the info box for him. Saint Keringham, mythical dragon fruit model, Chillin, or Kieran, a dream materializing man. And I actually found this the other day. I forgot that I had that. Got that I had this. I don't know if it's 100%, you know, a Kieran or a Chillin, depending on which version you want to call it, but it's pretty dang close. It's a dragon deer. It's pretty close. I got so many random dragons around my house, it's not even funny. So he pulls the salt out, and he's like, Ashbach salt. What, you've ever a connoisseur. So this is just, he's able to, the explanation that we get here for like how Quillingham, whatever you want to call him, for how he's able to use his devil fruit ability is he puts someone to sleep, and then he's able to materialize what he wants out of their dreams. And this is all of the food that they are eating as well. This is not real food. This is dream food. It's going to get brought up in a moment. But he's able to, you know, he was able to put the children to sleep, and then he has them that they're thinking about their demons, their, you know, their dream, you know, their nightmares and stuff like that. Then he is able to like reach in and pull those out and make them real. Give them a tangible form. And they, you know, he did this with like the food that they're currently eating and stuff like that. This also kind of is like very representation of like in Pokemon, there's, you know, Musharna, kind of drowsy and hypno as well, but like Musharna, that is, you know, they have like, they can put you to sleep, and then they have like their dream eater powers that they're able to use where they like, you know, are able to cause damage to the Pokemon when they're asleep. So this is a very similar thing there. And he pulls out just like really expensive salt. So I guess I googled like what's the most expensive salt in the world, and the answer that came back was Korean bamboo salt was the most expensive salt in the world. So I'm like, okay. I was gonna say, what is it gonna be? It's not like the Himalayan rock salt or whatever, because like that stuff's, I don't think, super expensive, but like, you know, it's there. So there's that. So we're getting a good explanation here, and then he like, you know, wakes up Summers, and then they go back to eating, you know, using the salt and everything. And Summers is like, and like as like we see the meeting, we kind of see in the background like the monsters kind of going through in the background behind them. And Summers is just like, that's the ability you use to pull those dream demons out of the brats' heads, right? So in Japanese, the translation is that the word is just MMA, not mixed media or whatever, mixed martial arts or whatever, but it's pronounced Muma, which is kind of where I got like the Musharna idea from a little bit. And it's like, this could be referred to, could be a reference to both a Pokemon, Musharna, and a monster in Appaman. I don't know what that is. I'm assuming it's some other type of anime, but like, yeah, Musharna, Pokemon, that type of thing. Those, the dream type animals and stuff like that, which are based on tapirs, and which are based on an animal that's called a tapir. We actually have a tapir at the zoo in Omaha, so I've seen them before. And I think there's also a Digimon that's based off of this. Tapirmon, I believe is his name, that we see a couple of times in some of the series, that does have, like, dream manipulation abilities and stuff like that, which eventually, when I get around, I can do a loop around and reference this when I talk about it, so that'll be fun. And Carringham is like, yes, of course I can use it to multiple times simultaneously. This salt is perfect. And, Summers is like, I agree. And it's just like, that ship dock at the village is meant for giants, but I think it's Gunko is continuing that, it's meant for giants. Or no, it's, I think, it might be Gunko that's talking. And it's just like, we should be able to make our own rainbows with a painter. And then, like, she's, really enjoying it. She's like, oh, this is delicious for how yummy it tastes. So this is referencing, like, the painter that the giants were able to use to make, like, the rainbow bridge to get up into Elbath when they got there. From there, they're continuing. It's just like, what a peculiar culture. It's just, yeah, I agree. I have to agree with you there. And then it's just like, so when we've done that, we just return to the Holy Land, and which is Carringham keeps going, and Summers was like, what? That's it? This game was way too easy. And Gunko is just like, I'm stuck. Hey, is this 0 calories? And Carringham is just like, well, it was a dream meal, ha ha ha. So of course it's 0. It's calorie free. And Summers just was like, don't let your guard down. And Gunko is saying, trouble is brewing. I saw a certain pirate ship anchored at the village. Emperor Straw Hat Luffy is on Elbath. And they're like, what? So it's like, she realized it. First time they noticed it. To be fair, when she was flying over Elbath, she was with Shamrock, not these two. So this is now her informing them that Luffy is here. So they didn't know that to begin with. Now they do. And one of the others is like, hey, aren't the kids heading straight for the fire? And she's like, it spread faster than I expected, but no matter. If they die, we'll just have the next batch march over. So again, it's like we see the kids following the arrow as it's going, towards where the fire is on the branch. Now we're cutting down to the underworld section, where we're going to cut back to where Luffy's group is dealing with Loki. And, we've got the other, Hyrule and the other New Giant Warrior pirates are just like, Loki, you no good, go ahead and try something, Hyrule. And he's just like laughing. He's like, there's no way you can stop me. None of you can even lift Ragnar. And he's just like standing there holding Ragnar, and he's kind of, bent over a little bit, and we'll get to, he's still grievously injured from, like, all the damage he incurred from, Shanks and Gunko, or from Shamrock and Gunko and everything. So he's still very badly injured. And Gerd is just like, we can't let you turn anyone else in the Sun Realm into a victim. And he's just like, oh, there will be victims. The fires are already spreading. Now choose. Surrender your weapons and let me go. Or, and then, like, we cut down to, like, Sanji is talking to Luffy, and he's like, hey, what's the deal with this monstrous giant? And Luffy's like, he's injured. If we don't help him. And Loki just keeps shouting, will you let everyone die? I'll slaughter every last weakling in the Sun Realm. And, the giant warrior pirate, the new giant warrior pirate's Hybridine's group is just like, trying to stop him. He's if you don't answer. And Hybridine's like, wait, we get it. And they're all getting ready to, like, lower their weapons. And, Loki's grinning. And Zoro is just like, don't fall for it, Hyrule. And he's like, Zoro? And Luffy's like, I guess there's no choice. I promised if you did anything, I'd drop you. And we get double page spread. Luffy is getting ready to jump up. Hyrule is still yelling at actually yelling at Luffy, and he's just like, wait, Straw Hat, he'll zap you if you get near. Luffy's immune to electricity. It's fine. He's fine. He'll be fine, Hyrule. Don't worry. And, Loki is getting ready to lift the hammer. I see, so that's your answer. And Gerd is like, there's no turning back from a crime like this. Just stop. Loki, think of the children. And Zoro's like, Luffy, are you going to let him off easy? His wounds are about to open up again. And Luffy jumps up, gum, and is, getting ready. And he actually doesn't end up doing that much damage to Loki. It's more like a tap that he's going to get to in a second. And Loki is just kind of like, I guess I lose this round. Because he's just, he's about to get hit anyway. And Luffy jumps up and does his arm balloon, where instead of it's just like expanding his bones, he's expanding his arm, which I'm assuming makes it not as impactful. But his intention at the moment is not to kill Loki, it's to knock him out. Which he succeeds. He hits him, and Loki just falls. Just collapses on the ground. Which is kind of what we thought was going to happen to Loki anyway, given how injured he is. And so he falls to the ground. And Zoro's like, he was already at death's door. Just standing was taking all the strength he could muster. It was a nice try. He probably planned on finding somewhere to pass out safely after he escaped. I doubt he'd have made it given the blood loss. Now, it's up to you whether you want to treat him or let him croak. And Luffy, jumps in and he's like, I have unfinished business with him, but he was covered in... I have unfinished business with him, but he was covered in blood. And Rhodes, it certainly looks like someone tried to kill him. And that's a separate issue from his prior crimes. And then Rhodes also thinking, it's just a hunch, but could it be... And he's probably thinking, could it be like the person that they heard about at the castle that showed up and, looked like Shanks? He's not wrong. And Luffy's like, Hyrule, I have a request. Please save his life. I don't care what kind of person he is. I just can't watch him die. Which is actually a rather good reflection on, Luffy's character. Because we know that Luffy has most assuredly killed people in this story, but it's not like it was his intention. He's knocked Marines off the ships, he's knocked other people into other dangerous situations. When he's running through Impel Down and they're in the blood hell or whatever, where there's the boiling blood or whatever, and he ends up knocking various guards or prisoners into there, they're most likely dead. So it's not like he hasn't killed people, it's just it's not usually his intention to. It's like all the main people that we see him fight, just go through the entire list, none of them are someone he has killed. And the thing is even if it is very likely that even if it is possible that Kaido is dead, it wasn't Luffy's intention to kill Kaido, it was his intention to defeat Kaido, which he did. And Hyrule is considering this, and Gerd jumps into action, and she somehow has her medical supplies with her, because she's got a bunch of blood supply and an IV setup that she's setting up for for Loki and everything. And he was like, how long for a full recovery? Several months at the least, for how much how long it's going to take Loki to fully recover. And he's like, if we're serious about treating these wounds, he shouldn't be sleeping in a place like this. And the others are just they're all talking. We see Loki is laid down on the ground, spread eagle again, and they've reattached several of the chains on his feet and on his arms as well, so he's not going anywhere. They've kind of moved Ragnar a bit away from him. He said that he's the only one that could lift it, so that's possibly just because it's so big. It's such a hard weapon to be able to move. Fair. Or it could be that, it could be like the whole, Thor, Loki, in Marvel, there's Thor's hammer that only, he who possesses the power of Thor, he who is worthy to lift this hammer shall possess the power of Thor. That whole setup that is the crux of a bunch of the Thor movies for who's able to lift the hammer and everything else like that. I do think, to be fair, at some points in time throughout the course of Marvel history in the comics, Loki has been able to lift the hammer. And if you have seen the series Loki on Disney Plus, I would say Loki, that is now the Loki at the very end of season 2, would be worthy to lift the hammer. But that's just my opinion. And what ends up happening, so it's, it's like this whole thing of like, okay, well, we got to get the hammer away from him just in case he wakes up again. But they have him like laid out and everything. They have like a bunch of logs that they lay down for like him to have like as at least somewhat of a bed to lay on, so he's not laying directly on the snow, which is probably a good idea. They have also removed his helmet type thing, his helmet, and we very clearly see his horns, which we'll get to in a second. But they're talking about, so it's like they won't be so forgiving at the village. It'd be a one-way ticket to execution. And the others are like, I don't mind staying with him, as I think I don't remember who, I can't tell who's saying that. I can't tell exactly who's saying that. And it's just like their hatred really runs deep. But I guess we are talking about unforgivable garbage. And like, so we're getting like this very good picture of what the different members of Hyrudine's crew think of Loki. And just like everybody else, they do not have a positive opinion of him. And we're going to see Hyrudine's opinion of Loki in a moment, along with a little bit of a flashback between the two of them. And so it is very much this whole concept of how much of these, how much of the stuff that we have seen with Loki is real, like his real personality and everything else like that, and how much of it is him doing the whole fine, I'll be the bad guy thing. And how much of it is like, oh, he's actually just the bad guy type of a thing. And like Luffy is like sitting on top of Loki's horns. And he's just like, wow, those horns are the real deal. And one of the others is like, it's the mark of the ancient giants. Our father, so it's Hyrudine, our father Harald was the same. So again, this is the callback to Harald has the horns of the ancient giants, or he had them before he ripped them off at some point in time. And Hyrudine does not, but Loki had the horns as well. So we get like this little cutback as we see Hyrudine like watching Loki, and we get like this little flashback where we have Harald, who we see still has his horns, are still there. This is before he's ripped them off. And we see Hyrudine and Loki. Now, we know that there is an 18-year age gap between Hyrudine and Loki. We do not know the exact answer for how quickly giant children tend to grow. We know that Colin is like 20, and he still looks like a child. He's older than Luffy, and he looks like either the same age or younger than Luffy was when this, back when we get like the original, the first chapter for One Piece with Luffy as a little kid. So we get here in this flashback, we see Harald, and he's talking to Loki and Hyrudine, and Loki, who is 18 years younger than Hyrudine, is already taller than Hyrudine by about a head. And Harald is saying, you are both my precious sons. I want you to get along when I'm gone and do what you can to support Elbath. And this initially made me think of, in the first Thor movie, kind of the movie, we get like the whole backstory of like Odin and blah, 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 Asgard, everything else. And then like he has Loki, he adopts Loki, and then we have him talking to Loki and Thor when they are children. And he's like, both of you were born to be kings, but only one of you will rule, type of a thing. As, with like them as children and everything else like that. That kind of made me think of, this kind of made me think of that. Again, Marvel brain. Disney, Marvel, Harry Potter, Pokemon, One Piece, DC throws in there somewhere. And what ends up happening is, in this flashback, we see that Loki and Hyrudine are fighting, and Hyrudine gets knocked down by Loki, and Loki's weapon looks like a Konobo, very similar to like Kaido's Konobo. And he's like, how can I call such a weak runt my big brother? And Loki, even at this young age, he's got like, the bandages around his eyes and everything like that. So again, it's like, we don't know exactly what types of bandages. I don't know. And he's just like, you're just a bastard. You'll never be Dad's true heir. So this whole, and like, him yelling at Hyrule, and we see like Hyrule, is crying and he's all beat up and everything. And Loki is continuing. It's like, everyone knows your mother's got dirty blood, is what he's, yelling at Hyrule and insulting him. And as I kept making comparisons, back when we first kind of got this introduction of Loki and found out that Hyrule was also a son of the king, I kept making the comparisons to Game of Thrones, where they have the trueborn children of like lords and stuff like that, or the king, and then there are the bastard children. And the very good example of this, I mean, like, depending on what you think of for theories in the show and theories in the books and everything else like that, you have, the trueborn Stark children, and then you have Jon Snow, who at the very least is portrayed as being a bastard child. And, in real life history, there were lots of kings who would have, illegitimate children with whatever many number of mistresses. Many kings of England and France and Germany and whatever else did this, where they had their queen, who was their wife, and then they have, whatever number of mistresses on the side, and then they will have like illegitimate children with their mistresses, and then they will have like their legitimate children with their wives, with their queens, and then the ones who are the legitimate children with the queen are the ones who are in line for the throne. And then in some cases, the king or whatever will like legitimize their illegitimate children. I know there was at least one of the kings of France, because so many of his children died so young that were his legitimate children, and he didn't have a lot of male family members. He elevated several of his sons that were his illegitimate sons with his mistresses to being princes of the blood, to being like legitimate princes, but they were like behind his like legitimate children. But like, it's like, if all of my legitimate sons and grandsons die, then these guys are the next in line, type of a thing. A lot of people look down upon that, because it's like putting someone who's not of legitimate birth on the throne. And even in, even going back to Game of Thrones, a good chunk of the time we have, in the beginning of the story, we have, Jon, who gets along well with most of his other siblings, or perceived siblings, depending on which theory you want to go with for who his actual mother is, and who his parents are. I don't 100% know where I fall on that one. But like, he's treated very well by Lord Stark, by Ned Stark, and by the rest of his siblings, all except Sansa. Sansa, because she takes very much after Catelyn, and Catelyn despises Jon because he is this supposed reminder of her husband's, infidelity, and this boy who looks more Stark than her own trueborn children, most of her own trueborn children. And Sansa very much, does not like Jon in the beginning of the story. And then at the very least in the show, you have that eventually they are reunited at Castle Black. And that is one of my favorite scenes in the show, is when Jon and Sansa are the first two Stark siblings that are fully reunited. And, it's just that great scene of them going and hugging, and it's, regardless of whatever other history has passed between them, she now knows what it feels like to look at the world from Jon's perspective. And she finally has one of her family members back, and like their relationship starts to heal through that time frame. And regardless of what you think of other things with Jon and Sansa in a relationship, not touching that right now. But cutting back to this, we have Hyrule has like picked up his axe, and like he's looking at Loki, and he's like picked up his axe, and he is like getting ready to just like slam it down onto Loki to like cut his head off, probably. And like Rode and Goldberg are jumping up and like grabbing Hyrule, so he can't do this, so he can't hit Loki. So we can't execute Loki. And it's just like, well, hold on, calm down, Hyrule. And he was like, there's no way I can ever forgive him for he insulted my mother and killed our father. And we don't know much else about Hyrudine's mother. There was a whole theory that maybe she's related to Saul, and like there's like the Hyrudine is like a member of the D clan as well through that, because like we know that Hyrudine's mother was from not Elbath, that she was born off of Elbath and is from like a giant tribe somewhere else in the world. And that's why he's considered, you know, a bastard child or an illegitimate child of the king. He's not considered a true born heir to the throne, otherwise he would outrank Loki as prince, but he doesn't have the prince title. And what ends up happening is, you know, so we get this, and then we have Loki talking, and Loki's kind of the one I think that like talks for the rest of the chapter. And he's like, he's kind of like woken up a bit, and he's like, do it already. This weeping warrior thing has gotten old. He's like, you're so drunk on all this personal drama, you can't even see the forest for the trees. Don't tell me you really think you're really like the rest, thinking I actually killed our father in cold blood. You don't really buy it, do you? And the last shot of the chapter is panels of Loki and Hyrudine right next to each other, and Hyrudine is kind of like, ugh, like, what is this? You know, what is this guy saying? And you know, that's like the whole comment is like, what is Loki saying? It's like, and you know, this goes into the whole theories that like so many have had already of like, did Loki actually kill King Harald? Was it something that it was staged? Was it actually Jarl that did it and Loki took the blame? And Jarl forgot about it because of the sword in his head. You know, how much of that is real? How much of that is this other stuff? How much of it is, you know, Loki, like, I've been portrayed as the bad guy my whole life, and maybe I embraced it at one point in time, but now it's just like, okay, I have to do it because if I become, you know, he's like, I've seen that Hyrudine would be a far better king for Elbath than I would ever be, and he is far more loved by the citizens now than they will ever look at me. And he has this passion far more to protect Elbath than I did. And therefore, he wants to have it be that Hyrudine can become king. And to do that, he's like, fine, then I'll be the bad guy. And that's kind of one of the theories going around right now. There is no break next week, so we will have a chapter next week. I don't really know. I don't know. We'll see what ends up happening. I want to throw Summers off of the top of Elbath. And just, you know, have him hit every branch on the way down. And then land on top of some very, very sharp rocks and see how he likes it. I want that. But besides that, I'm like, you know, we got updates on like their devil fruits, which are pretty close to what we thought they were going to be. You know, the Kieran devil fruit, and then, you know, thorns, something to do with that was kind of what we thought was going to be with Summers anyway, so that's not really much of a new thing there. But that's what we have here. I thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'm sorry for all of my tangents, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye!